Right now, most leaders in higher education aren't struggling with ideas. They're dealing with everything hitting all at once: budget pressure, AI, way too many initiatives, with no clear way to move forward at today's speed of change. So the real question is, how do you actually execute without breaking the institution? I'm Wayne Bovier, and this is Transformed. If you're a president, provost, vice chancellor, CIO, or VP leading change under pressure, you're in the right place. No theory, no fluff, no vendors. Just real conversation about what's working, what's not, and how to move faster, prioritize better, and actually get things done. Welcome. Let's dive in. They're struggling with everything hitting all at once and no clear way to move forward organizationally. And that's what this show is about: how leaders navigate that pressure and actually move their institutions forward anyway. Today, I'm joined by Damian Clarke. Damian is the VP of Technology at Alabama State University, and he's right in the middle of applying AI to real institutional challenges, from student engagement to breaking down operational silos. He served as both CIO and Chief Data Officer across multiple institutions and brings a perspective grounded in what actually works, not just what sounds good on paper. With a background that spans academic research and enterprise technology, he brings a unique lens to how institutions can actually move forward in this moment. Damian, thanks for being here.
Great to be here, Wayne. So what are we going to talk about today?
Well, let's jump right in. Let's just take AI head on, So, let's talk about where AI is actually landing, right? In practicality. There's a lot of conversation about AI in the classroom right now, but you're seeing something different. Where is AI actually having the biggest impact inside your institution today?
Yeah, great question. So I think the biggest misconception right now is that AI is primary impact is in the classroom. That's where the conversation is the loudest. But for me, it's not where the biggest gains are happening as yet. For me, the real impact is operational. So we are seeing AI drive value in areas like enrollment management, student communication, financial aid processing, even in IT service delivery. Places where there's high volume, repetitive decision-making, and fragmented data. These are prime locations for AI. So for example, institutions are sitting on years of student interaction data, but it's not being used in a coordinated way. So AI allows us to actually surface insights and act on them in real time, whether that's identifying a student at risk, improving response time across departments, completing a FAFSA application. So what people are missing in this is AI is not just a teaching tool. It's become I would say, the connecting tissue of the institution.
I love that. You and I have gotten to know each other a little bit, and building upon what you just said, you think about, higher ed is notorious for silos, right? And you think about, obviously AI in the classroom, but what you just touched on is operationally, it's going to become way more important, and potentially connecting these departments. What would it take, and maybe you don't have all the answers to this, which is totally okay. What would it take for institutions to actually start to break down those silos with AI? Because that's one of the things I consistently see and hear is, oh my God, we got an avalanche of project requests coming from everywhere on top of all these project requests coming from everywhere with AI, So what are your thoughts about that?
So I love the question. And as the IT guy, I love saying this or answering questions like this. So I would say breaking silos isn't really a technology problem. We have a lot of tools. Some of us have reached a point of AI, some of us are not there. So I think breaking silos is more of an operational or operating model problem. So when you look at higher ed, it has always historically been decentralized. So admissions operates one way, financial aid another, HR another. And they are often optimized for their own outcomes, not for the student or for the institutional experience as a whole. AI now exposes that fragmentation very quickly. So if your data isn't aligned, if your workflow, your processes isn't aligned, then your processes aren't consistent. And AI doesn't necessarily fix that, it actually amplifies it. So what it actually takes is leadership alignment around shared outcomes across different departments. So you need agreement on what success looks like across those units. And then you align data, workflow, processes, and then technology behind that. So the institutions that are making progress are the ones that are treating AI as a cross-functional capability, not just a department tool, not a chatbot, but a group of agents working within a department and across multiple departments.
That's great. Let's build upon that, right? Because again, you're exactly right. I'm seeing the same things. How do you treat AI as a strategic enterprise-wide initiative, knowing that there's lots of features and capabilities underneath that in different departments? And so, prioritization comes immediately to mind, right? Because in a shared governance model, in a siloed environment, everyone's focused on kind of their thing, but there needs to be enterprise-wide prioritization. So, on paper, it sounds structured, but in reality, it's not. And so, what's your thoughts about how prioritization actually gets set inside, Alabama State or other institutions that you've seen, and how do you think it should improve?
Great question. So if I were to be honest, prioritizations at most institutions today, including Alabama State, is still very reactive, right? It's driven by urgency and not necessarily strategy. So something breaks, a leader pushes for something, a board asks a question, that becomes the priority. And over time, everything starts to feel like a priority. So what we end up with is a long list of important initiatives, but no real sequencing of capacity alignment behind them. So an IT, feels that pressure because IT, we sit in the intersection of all of these moving pieces. So what I've seen work better is when institutions shift from asking, what do we need to do, to what can we realistically execute well. So that's a different conversation, and it forces trade-offs. And that's where leadership really comes in, not just at the IT level, CIO level, but board level, executive leadership level, and throughout the various departments.
I want to lean into this before we move to the next question. And then, by the way, what you've just described is so common, right? And capacity, right, is a major factor in how you prioritize your strategy, right? So as capacity is down here, strategy is up at the top of the organization. When I think about, and I have my own thoughts obviously on this, but when I think about where we are as an industry and that reactive model, which is way more common in every institution than I think most CIOs that I speak with would want it to be. How can you comment? Like, what's your talk about that model? How sustainable is it in this AI world that we're in? Because that to me feels like, I think, you and I are old enough that we go back to the days of technical debt and a lot of customizations, right? We've, recently over the last 5 to 10 years, there's been a bigger shift in the industry to standardize, but now it seems like that genie's back out of that bottle.
Yeah, so it is very not sustainable. It drives initiative fatigue, and it causes a lot of unnecessary pressure. And while AI could help if done correctly, if it is not, it accelerates the breaking point. Because now the expectation is speed. People see what AI can do and assume that everything should move faster. But the underlying model is still very reactive and fragmented. And what happens is you would create more pressure without increasing capacity. So what breaks first is execution. You got a whole lot of projects, a whole lot of initiatives, but nothing is being executed as quickly as stakeholders would like. So you get initiative fatigue, you get staff burnout, especially in my environment when the staff is very small. And you get a lot of partially completed efforts that never fully deliver value. So the shift has to happen from doing more to doing fewer things better and being very intentional about where AI is applied to actually create leverage.
Yeah, let's talk. That's a great segue into this next area, which is, the execution implementation of that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And again, capacity. What I've seen is teams that are overwhelmed by the demand
Mm-hmm.
with a small amount of capacity. Things never get done, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or they take way too long, and everybody's unhappy about that. And so, based upon the work that you're doing today, the AI projects that you're doing, when you introduce something new, like think about AI automation, what actually is working? How what are you seeing it positively in executing the model?
Yeah. So I guess for me, AI or other initiatives, AI is obviously a very big and in-depth initiative. What works is starting small, but starting intentionally. So not just doing a pilot for doing a pilot's sake, but very targeted use cases where you can show measurable impact quickly. So for example, instead of saying we're implementing AI across student services, we pick one area, like for example, improving response times for student inquiries, completing FAFSA, and then try and solve that really well. And by doing that, now you build momentum from there, and also you get buy-in from results and not mandates. So this also build what I call campus champions, which is very, very critical. So you need people you need people inside of the departments who see the value, understand the workflows, understand the processes, and can advocate for change in a way that resonates within their peers. So when the IT guy says it, it doesn't stick. It's a mandate. But if it's coming from within the business unit, it tends to scale.
That's great. Just quick follow up on that. This is a long journey for everybody,
Oh,
right? And
yes.
I think,
Yeah.
I think you're not at the starting blocks. You're much farther along than many institutions. What's a one piece of advice when it comes to this particular subject that you would have for other CIOs? Like, how would you start? Like, if they're behind you guys, like in this process, what was your advice about where should they start?
So I would look for pain points. Every unit has a pain point. And look, some units may have a pain point and not have the political will to actually remove the pain point. So find a unit or department that has a pain point and find a campus champion that is willing to work with you to fix that pain point. And get a small piece automated or small piece AI infused, build momentum from there, and let that campus champion or departmental champion evangelize the value to their peers. And look at me, look at how I'm doing it now. I have a lot more free time. Let them evangelize the new value, the new initiative, and that's how you build momentum.
Yeah, that's great. That's a great advice. when we were talking, I'm going to move us into this of strategy, right? When you
Mhm.
and I were talking, something you said that really kind of stood out to me is that sometimes strategy isn't explicit, right?
Yeah,
Which is for those of us that
yeah,
are in higher ed, we know that
yeah.
is all too common. And the strategic plan, although really important, tends to be shelfware, like done, printed out,
Yes.
and on the shelf, and it's adapted to align with leadership and the board. Can you just unpack that a little bit more?
Mhm.
I'd love to hear more of your
Def-
thoughts about that.
yeah, definitely. So, the reality that people don't always want to talk about is that in higher ed isn't always a clean top-down process. So a lot of times it's adaptive, reactive. So you have institutional priorities, then you would have leadership perspective, then you would have board expectations, and strategy becomes the alignment of all of these forces over time. So part of the role as a CIO, you have to translate technical possibilities. I call it the art of the possible into outcomes that resonate at the specific levels where priorities and perspective and expectations exist. So it's not just here's what AI can do. It's how this supports enrollment growth, retention growth, persistent growth, student success, and my personal favorite, operational efficiency. So the institution that does this well are constantly aligning, not just planning once and executing. So strategy becomes something you refine continuously.
Quick follow up on that. By the way, it's a great example of what you've just described is the new job description of a
Mm-hmm.
CIO.
Oh, definitely.
And it is, so I'm curious to know, like, I mean, because it is literally the kitchen sink. You got to do a
Mm-hmm.
lot of different things. It's
Yes.
not just a technical job anymore. In
Yes.
fact, it's actually more. But just a quick follow up on that. What do you think when you think about today and then in the future?
Mhm.
What's the role of a CIO in strategy
Mm.
creation?
So I think it would change or it would vary according to the leadership team at the organization. A lot of times, and unfortunately, even after a pandemic, technology is still the quote unquote bastard child. So, you got to impose it on the leadership. In some cases, like in my case, I have a president who is technology savvy. In fact, yesterday at our cabinet meeting, we were talking about AI and the things that he wants to see and do. So now I take his directive, his leadership, and now I can evangelize. This is what the president wants. This is how we are going to implement it. So it all depends on the organization. It all depends on the leadership culture and mentality. The CIO now has to be what's the best word? He has to be he or she has to be the one that is able to effectively communicate at the level and the perspective of the various stakeholders. And it is not technical. That's the last thing you want to bring up when evangelizing something like AI.
Yeah, historically, IT has been a cost center, right? Like for
Yes,
years, decades,
yes,
right?
yes.
Reporting in the CFO, it's like how do
Yeah.
we reduce costs?
Yes,
And a
yes,
big fundamental shift is now it is a strategic role, right?
yes,
And
yes.
it's got to wear lots of different hats, as you just described. So,
Yeah.
very much aligned to that. So, I'm going to move into this new section that we're doing as part
Mhm.
of Transformed. I always like this. Hopefully, it should be fun. We call this rapid fire. So the
Okay.
idea here is that I'll ask you a couple questions, like five
Mhm.
or 4 or 5 questions, and the idea is for you to just whatever first pops into your head. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, all right. The first question is, what's the biggest misconception about AI in higher ed right now?
Yeah, I would say definitely it's that AI is primarily an academic tool. It can do wonders with customizing as a hyper personalized tutor. But I think the biggest impact is operational, improving operational efficiency across all of the functional units.
Love it. One thing CIOs should stop doing.
This is very difficult, but we, and I do it myself, we need to stop saying yes to everything. And we need to focus on creating value rather than volume.
What is your single biggest challenge today? And you can't say this podcast.
So within AI or just across the board? Yeah.
With you, like with you. Well, oh no, across the board.
Across the board.
Need to be AI. Yeah.
So I think it's finding that common ground with specific stakeholders to communicate a new initiative. So whether it's AI, security, cloud, identity access management, how do I break down a highly technical concept and create analogies that my stakeholders can understand the importance of it and then get buy-in for it.
Great.
Yeah.
2 more questions. Actually 3, but this section is 2 more questions. So one capability institutions you think need in the next 12 months? I would say this is for all institutions, not just higher ed, and that is data alignment. So if your data isn't usable, we all have a lot of data, more than we know. So if your data isn't usable and connected, AI won't deliver what you expect. You're going to have issues with security. You would have issues with workflows. You would have issues with siloedness, if there's such a word. Yeah, that's exactly right. Last question on this. What separates institutions that actually move forward versus the ones that stay stuck? Yeah, definitely data alignment. So there must be alignment across units and execution. We spend a lot of, it's needed. We spend a lot of time in meetings, but we have to spend more time executing. We need to be more result oriented. So the ability to make decisions, commit and follow through to get to those results is what is going to move and separate institutions from the other. Some just talk, others actually do. Love it. Leadership really matters, and I think you're a great example of one of those amazing leaders that are getting a lot done, and I think there's a lot for many people to learn from you. And so, let me kind of wind this down, and there's a lot coming at you, right? Mm-hmm. More change, more pressure, more Definitely. Expectations than ever. And that's why for me, how we approach, we're partners, right? We mm-hmm. own your problem. We're not just an outside vendor coming in and then we leave. We own it, right? And so I want to end this with one last question on more on the personal side. And this could this can be anything, right? For you, Damian, what are you personally focusing on for you this next 12 months? That's a very interesting question, and I'm really glad you asked that, because I read an interesting article this morning, and the gist of the article is something that I've always been saying to myself and others. And with the advent of AI and the way it's changing how we do traditional software development and engineering and building products, we have to a lot of people say you got to think outside the box. I think we now have to realize there is no box and we have to just think, right? And all of our traditional, quote unquote, normal ways, that is going out the door. I mean, as a father,
I am so concerned as to how to expose my children in such a manner that they don't follow in my footsteps. My footsteps are becoming null and void. I'm actually a living dinosaur, right? And they need to be thinking and doing in a very non-traditional, non-normal way of solving problems and using the very, very powerful tools that exist today to progress and move forward.
You know, as a fellow dinosaur, I agree with that completely. Our parents had it easy compared to us raising kids in this environment. So, Damian, this is great. I very much appreciate you jumping on here.
Mhm.
You know, in particular, I really appreciate your perspective and how grounded in reality it is. You know, and not just what institutions should be doing, but actually how it operate.
Mhm.
You know, and you don't have it. No one really has it all figured out. But we all need to work together to figure out how do we help move forward. Because as you just talked about with your kids, right? Every day is different, right?
Yes.
And there's a lot to worry about. You can get distracted by a lot. And so, kudos to you and the work that you're doing at Alabama State. And thank you for joining me. And for everyone listening and now watching, this is Transform, where we focus on how institutions move forward when everything is hitting all at once. Damian, that's great. Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Transformed. If this conversation made you rethink how work actually moves or gets stuck inside your institution, share it with somebody on your leadership team. Because this isn't about more ideas. It's about getting the right things done when everything's competing for your attention. For more, visit hire.digital/podcast or follow us on LinkedIn. I'm Wayne Bovier. Let's keep moving forward together.